The July heat pressed down on Manhattan like a smothering blanket, thick and relentless, and inside the 15th floor of Techline Solutions it was worse. The air conditioning had sputtered out 2 days earlier, and every hour since had turned the glass-walled office into a greenhouse of stale air and sticky nerves. Samantha Miller sat at her desk, back damp beneath her blouse, fingers hovering uselessly over her keyboard. The cursor blinked on her monitor, a silent metronome to her quickening pulse. She had just received the kind of email that made time fracture into before and after. Mr. Bennett would like to see you in his office immediately. Her throat went dry. Richard Bennett was not the kind of man who summoned anyone without reason. 53, sharp as the suits he wore, he was known for dismantling competitors with nothing more than a glance across a negotiation table. His voice, calm as still water, carried the weight of a man who never needed to shout to be obeyed. And now, he wanted her. Samantha smoothed her skirt with palms that betrayed her with sweat. She rose, heels clicking too loudly against the tiled floor, every step toward his office echoing like a drumbeat of dread. Her reflection caught in the glass wall showed a young woman trying her best to appear composed, dark hair pulled into a tidy bun, blouse buttoned high, posture correct. But beneath the polished surface, her heart rattled like loose change in a jar. The moment she pushed open his door, a rush of chilled air enveloped her. His office was cold, almost cruel in contrast to the sweltering hall outside, as though comfort was reserved only for him. He didn't look up right away. He scribbled something across a file, the scratching of his pen loud in the stillness. Then finally, "Sit." She obeyed, back stiff, eyes fixed on him. "I'll get straight to it," he said, leaning back, gaze Sue, harp. "There's a position at Innovate Corp., assistant to the director, George Whitman. I'm considering putting your name forward." The words hit her like a burst of cool water. Innovate. Everyone in the industry whispered about it. The kind of place where careers weren't just built, they were launched. The salary alone, $15,000 a month, full coverage, international travel, was enough to change her life, to erase the weight of student loans, to finally give her the freedom she had been chasing since graduation. She stammered, I don't know what to say. Thank you." But his smile wasn't kind. It was measured, calculated. "There's one thing," he said, folding his hands. "George is particular about his assistants. He wants someone with presence, maturity, life experience." The phrase caught in her chest. Life experience. Richard's eyes never left hers as he continued. "Your resume is spotless. Your evaluations here are strong. But Whitman doesn't just value skill. He values sophistication. A certain readiness." Her palms prickled. "Are you suggesting I'm not ready?" He tilted his head, unbothered by the steel in her voice. "I'm suggesting you may want to consider how you present yourself. You're bright, Samantha, ambitious, but you're also," he paused, savoring the word, "sheltered." The humiliation landed like a slap. She swallowed hard, fighting the flush rising up her neck. "How do you know anything about my personal life?" He arched an eyebrow. "We run background checks. We know enough. You're young, untouched even." That's not always a strength in George's eyes. The silence after was suffocating. The hum of the fluorescent lights grew louder, every second stretching. Samantha forced her voice into something steady. "So you're saying if I want this opportunity, I need to change?" "I'm saying," Richard replied smoothly, "you have 5 days. Think about the story you want to tell when you sit across from him." He turned back to his screen, dismissing her without another glance. She rose on shaky legs, her pulse roaring in her ears, and walked out. The corridor heat struck her like a wall, but it wasn't sweat on her skin now. It was shame. In the restroom, she gripped the sink, staring into the mirror at a face she barely recognized. Wide eyes, flushed cheeks, lips pressed thin to hold back the tremor in her chest. Was this what it meant to be a woman in this world? That her worth wasn't measured by skill, but by how convincingly she could appear older, less innocent, more bruised by life? Her reflection didn't answer, but in the silence, something stirred. Not rage, not yet, but a flicker of decision. If she couldn't change her past, maybe she could change how the world saw her. By the time night fell, Samantha lay awake in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, phone clutched in her hand. She thought of sacrifices, of years of doing everything right, and still being told she wasn't enough. And in the dark, a name surfaced like a lighthouse through fog. Nathan Brooks, her best friend, her constant. Her heart pounded as she typed a message that would change everything. "Nathan, I need to talk to you tonight." She hit send, breath shallow, waiting for the reply that would set her fate in motion. The night had wrapped Manhattan in velvet darkness, the kind that softened the city's edges and muffled its noise until only the heartbeat of those who wandered late remained. Samantha stood outside the towering glass building on the Upper West Side, staring at her faint reflection in the double doors. Her heels ached from the walk, her palms were damp, and her pulse refused to steady. It was nearly 11 when she finally gathered the courage to step inside, her simple message still glowing on her phone. "Nathan, I need to talk to you tonight." His reply had come instantly. "Of course. Come whenever you want." The doorman recognized her and let her through without question. The marble lobby gleamed, catching the echo of her steps like whispers chasing her into the elevator. She pressed the penthouse button and felt her chest rise and fall too quickly, as though each breath was being stolen by the gravity of what she was about to do. The ride stretched like eternity, every passing floor reminding her that she was climbing towards something irreversible. When the doors opened, Nathan was already there. He wore a navy hoodie, soft gray sweatpants, and no shoes. His dark hair was tousled from restless hands, and his hazel eyes searched her face instantly, like they could read the storm she carried. "Sammy," he said softly. "What happened?" His voice was low velvet, carrying both worry and tenderness that made her throat tighten. The penthouse smelled faintly of sandalwood and the remnants of coffee, a fragrance she associated only with him. The lights were dim, shadows and city glow pooling against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Somewhere in the background a jazz record hummed quietly, as if it had been waiting for her arrival. She stepped inside and hesitated just beyond the threshold, fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, and her voice cracked. Nathan set his glass of water down and gestured toward the couch. "Sit with me." The city glittered behind him like a million secret witnesses as she perched stiffly on the edge of the sofa. He folded his legs beside her, his body angled in, his expression steady even as concern etched deep lines at the corners of his mouth. "Tell me everything," he urged, and the words felt like an open door. Samantha drew in a shaky breath. "I was offered something today, a position at Innovate Corp. It's everything I thought I wanted. 15,000 a month, travel, access, all of it." Nathan's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's incredible, Sammy. You should be proud." But then she told him the rest. She repeated Richard Bennett's words, the insinuation that she lacked experience, that innocence was not a strength, that she needed to look like she had lived more than she had. Each word dragged her deeper into the shame she'd carried all evening. Nathan's jaw tightened, his hands clasped together, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's disgusting. It's manipulative. I know," she cut in sharply, "but that's not why I came here." He blinked. "Then why?" She leaned forward, her voice trembling but steady with intent. "Because I want it to be you, Nathan. I want my first time to be with you." The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend steel. His breath caught, his shoulders tensed, and for a moment the world outside the window seemed to still. He searched her eyes, maybe for a sign she was joking, maybe for a reason to say no. "Sammy," he whispered, "you don't mean that." "I do." She insisted, "I trust you more than anyone I've ever known. I don't want to give this to a stranger who doesn't care about me. I want to choose you." Nathan rose abruptly and walked toward the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. His reflection stared back at him, fractured by city lights. "You don't understand what you're asking. You think this will make you stronger, but you're not thinking about tomorrow. You're hurting and you want control, but this isn't the way." She stood too, her chest heaving with the words she had buried for years. I'm not a child, Nathan. I've spent my whole life waiting for the right job, the right moment, the right person. But when does it ever come? If I keep waiting, I'll lose everything. His voice softened with desperation. It comes when you're not trying to prove something to someone who doesn't matter. She stepped closer, eyes burning. You matter, Nathan. You've always mattered. You're the only one who has ever seen me. The air between them throbbed with a charge neither of them had ever dared cross. His hands hovered near her shoulders, trembling between reaching out and retreat. I don't want to take advantage of your pain, he whispered, and I don't want to be something you regret. You won't be, she said, her voice a raw plea. You could never be. For a moment time bent around them. The city faded, the music dimmed, the candles flickered shadows across walls that seemed to lean closer to listen. He lifted his hand and touched her cheek gently, thumb grazing her jaw. She leaned into it, a motion that broke through years of restraint. His voice was almost broken. I need time. Not because I don't want this, but because I want it too much. I've wanted you for years, but not like this. Not in desperation. I want you in love. Her heart stopped, then started again with a new rhythm, one she had never let herself hear until now. The words didn't end the storm inside her, but they changed it, bending it into something more dangerous, more hopeful, more alive. The line between them was drawn but not erased, and Samantha knew as she stood there trembling that nothing between her and Nathan would ever be the same again. The candlelit glow of the small Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village flickered across Samantha's face as she sat across from Nathan. The walls were old brick, lined with framed photographs of forgotten singers and faded landscapes, the kind of place they had always come to in college when the world outside felt too loud. Now the hum of other voices was just a blur, the scent of roasted garlic heavy in the air, and the quiet between them carried more weight than any crowded silence ever could. Nathan leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes holding hers as though he were bracing for impact. I've been thinking about what you said the other night. His voice was calm, but his fingers traced the rim of his glass with restless energy. Samantha froze, her fork hovering above her plate. The memory of that night in his penthouse rushed back, her words echoing in her mind, raw and desperate. I want it to be you. She had been sure she had broken something between them. He continued, I wanted to be angry. Angry that you'd ask me to cross that line. Angry that you'd reduce something sacred into something desperate. But I couldn't. Her pulse spiked. Why not, she whispered. Because I knew why you asked, he said quietly, and because deep down I wanted to say yes. Her chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. He looked at her across the flickering candle, his hazel eyes darker than usual, and suddenly he didn't look like the boy she had grown up with. He looked like the man who had been waiting. I've loved you since we were 13, Nathan said. Just like that. No build-up, no theatrics, only truth laid bare. The words slammed into her like a storm. She blinked at him, stunned, her heart racing so fast she thought she might faint. What? He smiled softly, sadness etched into the corners of his mouth. I loved you when you had braces and swore you'd marry a rock star. I loved you when you tripped at prom and made me slow dance with you on crutches. I loved you when you got your first job and called me crying because you thought you ruined everything on the first day. Her throat burned with unshed tears. You never said anything. I couldn't, he said. You saw me as your best friend and I told myself that was enough. I told myself I would rather live in your orbit than risk losing you altogether. The weight of his words pressed against her chest until she thought she might collapse under it. All those years she thought she had been alone in her secret glances, her fleeting thoughts, her half-buried dreams. And now here he was, unraveling the truth she had never dared to imagine. Her voice trembled. I thought you didn't see me that way. I thought it was always just me. Nathan shook his head slowly. You were always chasing something bigger. College, careers, dreams. I didn't want to be one more thing pulling you away. The tears spilled now, hot and unstoppable. Why now, she whispered. Because now I see you clearly, he said. Not the girl I loved in silence. The woman in front of me now. Brave, complicated, hurting, and still the most important person in my life. Her fork clattered against her plate as she set it down, hands trembling. She wanted to run, to hide, to retreat into the safety of the past where best friends were untouchable. But another part of her, the part that had pressed send on that midnight message, whispered, "Stay." "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," he said. "So am I." The candle flickered between them like it was trying to decide whose secret it would guard first. Nathan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers lightly, an invitation more than a claim. Her hand shook as it met his, their palms pressing together as if the world outside the little restaurant had finally vanished. In that moment, Samantha knew the ground beneath her life had shifted forever. Their friendship wasn't safe anymore. It was dangerous, charged, alive, and once spoken, some truths refused to ever be buried again. Rain hammered the glass like 1,000 whispered warnings as Samantha stood outside Nathan's penthouse once more. The streets below shimmered with reflections of neon and headlights, but all she could see was her trembling hand pressed against the elevator button, her chest rising and falling in uneven waves. She had told herself 100 times not to come, not to risk everything, but something stronger than reason pulled her upward through the floors until the doors slid open with a soft sigh. Nathan was waiting, barefoot in dark jeans and a charcoal shirt, sleeves rolled as though he had been pacing. His hazel eyes caught hers the moment she stepped inside, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The room smelled of rosemary and garlic, his attempt at dinner abandoned on the counter. Candles flickered low on the kitchen island, their light bending shadows across the wide expanse of windows that framed the storm. She didn't speak at first. She just walked forward, her shoes leaving faint marks on the marble. He met her halfway, concern battling with something deeper in his face, something unspoken but undeniable. "Sammy," he whispered, "tell me why you're here." Her breath caught in her throat. "Because I can't pretend anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't want to wait, Nathan. I don't want to bury what I feel, not when I know you felt it too." His shoulders tensed, his jaw tightening as though he was fighting against himself. "I told you I've wanted you for years, but not like this, not because of desperation." She stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached for his. "This isn't desperation. This is me choosing. For once in my life, I'm not letting fear decide." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. He stood motionless, torn between retreat and surrender. Then slowly, as though every second was a battle, his fingers curled around hers. The moment their hands locked, the air shifted. It was no longer friendship. It was fire. It was hunger. It was inevitability. Nathan drew her closer, his breath unsteady against her temple. "Do you know what you're asking me?" he whispered. "Yes," she breathed. "I'm asking you to stop protecting me and just want me." It broke him. The restraint he had clung to for years snapped in an instant. His lips crashed against hers, fierce and trembling, not the soft confession of love, but the raw release of everything they had buried. Samantha melted into him, her back pressed against the cool glass, the storm outside raging as if it had been summoned by them alone. His hands traced her sides with reverence and urgency, as though afraid she might vanish if he didn't memorize every curve, every breath. She gasped into his mouth, her innocence colliding with the force of his control breaking apart. He pulled back for only a second, his forehead pressed against hers, his voice hoarse with conflict. "If I lose control with you, I'll never forgive myself." "Then don't forgive yourself," she whispered. "Just stay with me." The storm outside cracked with lightning, illuminating the moment their restraint shattered completely. They moved together, unsteady but unstoppable, the years of friendship unraveling into something both terrifying and holy. Every kiss was a confession, every touch a vow, every gasp a reminder that they had crossed into a place they could never return from. When finally they collapsed into the quiet of candlelight, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her as though he had always been waiting for this. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The storm outside carried the words neither dared to say out loud. That one night had changed everything, and neither of them could ever take it back. Morning light spilled across the skyline in fractured gold as Samantha buttoned her navy suit jacket, each click of the pearl buttons steadying hands that had not stopped trembling since the night before. The storm had broken, not just outside the windows of Nathan's penthouse, but inside her life. What had begun as fear had turned into fire, and now as she stared at her reflection, she did not see the timid girl who had once questioned her worth. She saw a woman carrying a secret too new to name, a secret that lived in the memory of his touch, in the echo of his voice when he whispered her name as if it were prayer. She tucked a note into her purse before leaving, Nathan's handwriting sharp and sure on the paper. No matter what happens, you already won. Proud of you, N. It was not a love letter. It was something heavier, a shield she carried with her as she stepped into the steel and glass tower that housed Innovate Corp. The lobby was cathedral-like in its silence, polished floors reflecting on the ambition of everyone who walked them. She rode the elevator to the 24th floor, her heart pounding harder with each number that lit up above the doors. By the time she stepped into George Whitman's office, her breath was calm, but her pulse thundered. George was older than she imagined, his wireframe glasses glinting under the overhead light, his vest precise and neat. He rose as she entered, extended his hand firmly, his eyes sharp and assessing. Samantha returned his grip without hesitation, though her palms were damp with nerves. "Ms. Miller," he said, "let's see what you're made of." For 45 minutes, questions fired at her like arrows. He asked about failures and recoveries, about loyalty and instinct, about how she read people when logic told her one thing and her intuition another. He was not measuring her resume. He was weighing her soul. And then came the moment that froze her blood. Richard Bennett said you may not be ready, said you lacked certain worldly perspectives. The words hung heavy in the air. She thought of the insinuations, of Richard's cold smile, of the shame that had burned her skin. But Samantha did not flinch. She leaned forward, her voice calm. "I've lived a different kind of experience. One that taught me how to adapt, how to listen when no one else does, how to read what isn't said. That's what matters in this role." A silence followed, not cruel, but contemplative. Then George's lips curved into something that resembled approval. He asked no more questions. He only said, "We'll be in touch." By the time Samantha stepped into the elevator again, her phone buzzed. "Congratulations. The position is yours." The words blurred through the sudden tears burning her eyes. People hurried past her in the lobby, too busy to notice the young woman standing frozen with her phone pressed to her chest. For a heartbeat, the victory felt complete. But beneath the exhilaration, a whisper of unease curled around her ribs. Her win had been born of truth, but shadowed by a night that no one else could ever know. A night that had given her strength, and at the same time threatened to undo everything she thought she was building. As she stepped out onto the street, the city blinding in its brilliance, she knew two truths at once. She had just crossed the threshold into the future she dreamed of, and she had also opened a door that could never again be closed. The morning began with a silence that felt wrong. Samantha pushed through the revolving doors of Innovate Corp, expecting the usual rush of footsteps, the sharp click of heels, the buzz of phones. Instead, the lobby felt like a cathedral after a sermon, hollow and echoing. The receptionist offered her a strained smile but avoided her eyes, and that was the first fracture in her confidence. By the time she reached the 24th floor, the air was different. Colleagues huddled near water coolers with hushed voices. Glass conference doors that were always open were now closed tight, and the phones that usually rang off the hook lay silent on their cradles. At her desk, Samantha tried to log in, but the screen denied her again and again. Access restricted. A cold tremor slid down her spine. Her supervisor appeared at her side, her face carefully composed. "Come with me. Now." The walk down the hall felt endless. A small room waited, bare except for a table and two chairs. Inside sat a man from HR and a woman from legal, their folders aligned in perfect symmetry, their expressions too polished to be kind. Please sit, Ms. Miller. She lowered herself slowly, her pulse hammering. The words came in flat tones. As of this morning, Innovate Corp is under federal investigation. George Whitman was taken into custody for fraud and embezzlement. Effective immediately, all contracts made under his authority are suspended. Her mind struggled to keep up. Fraud, custody, suspended. Each word was a stone dropping into water, pulling her under. She heard her own voice, distant and thin. So, I don't have a job. The HR man nodded with mechanical sympathy. The contracts are invalid. We're required by law to terminate all recent hires in his division. Papers slid across the table, the black letters blurring in her vision. Terms, severance, cooperation. She signed because her hand moved automatically, even as her heart refused to accept it. By 10:15, she was outside on the sidewalk, clutching a cardboard box filled with her few belongings. The wind cut across the street, but it wasn't the cold that made her shake. It was the speed of it all. Yesterday, she was the girl who had finally won. Today, she was no one. As the day bled into afternoon, her phone erupted with news alerts. Tech titan arrested. Innovate Corp rocked by scandal. Whispers and speculation followed in every headline. Some even suggested assistants were complicit, chosen for reasons that had nothing to do with merit. She read one line twice until it seared into her chest. Did she sleep her way in? Her breath hitched. She pressed the phone to her chest and sobbed, shame rising like poison in her veins. She thought of Nathan, of his hands steady when hers shook, of his voice when he said you already won. But now those words twisted inside her. What if the world believed she had used him? What if he believed it? That night she ignored his calls, ignored the messages that lit her phone again and again. Please let me come to you. I'm here no matter what. She curled on the couch in darkness, unable to answer because the question beating in her mind was louder than his voice. Had she given her heart for nothing? The city outside roared with sirens and traffic, indifferent to the storm tearing through her. Inside her small apartment, Samantha clutched a pillow to her chest and let the silence consume her. The dream was gone, the job was gone, and worse still, the fragile new beginning with Nathan was slipping through her fingers, not because he left, but because shame had built a wall she did not know how to climb. The city was alive that Saturday night, streets lit with neon and chatter, but Samantha walked through it like a ghost. A week had passed since Innovate collapsed, a week since she had shut Nathan out, and every step felt heavier than the last. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten properly, hadn't answered his messages except to stare at them until her vision blurred. Tonight was different, though. She couldn't explain why, only that something inside her pushed her to leave the apartment and breathe air that didn't taste like regret. She found herself on Spring Street, staring at the little cafe they used to love, the one where Nathan always ordered 2 coffees without asking because he knew exactly how she took hers. The memory cut her deeper than any headline or rumor ever could. She kept walking until her legs ached, until the ache matched the throb inside her chest. Back at Techline on Monday, whispers followed her through the corridors. Colleagues glanced too long, then looked away, pretending they hadn't. She heard fragments in passing Innovate scandal, executive assistant, background checks. She lowered her head and buried herself in spreadsheets, but every cell on the screen blurred into Nathan's face, the one she had refused to see for days. By midweek, her colleague Elisa leaned across her desk, her voice low. I saw Nathan last night. He wasn't alone. The words froze her blood. Samantha's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the desk, but she forced a neutral smile. Thanks for letting me know. Elisa walked away, unaware she had just detonated something inside her. That night, Samantha sat in her apartment staring at the ceiling. The thought of Nathan with someone else spread like fire through her veins. She had no right to blame him. She had pushed him away, ignored his calls, shut him out when he had tried to stay. But knowing he was with another woman was worse than losing her job, worse than the scandal. It was losing the one place she had always called safe. She tried to picture him laughing at dinner, reaching across a table to touch another hand, offering the same patience and warmth he had once given her. The image made her stomach twist. She whispered to the empty room, "I was too late, wasn't I?" Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a new message from him. "You never have to apologize to me. I'm still here. Always." Tears filled her eyes instantly, but she couldn't bring herself to reply. Still here didn't mean still waiting. Still here didn't mean his arms hadn't already found someone else. Days stretched into nights, each one darker than the last. She threw herself into work, staying late, taking on projects no one wanted, anything to drown out the silence. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. She heard the rain on the glass the night he finally kissed her. She felt the warmth of his hand steadying hers at dawn. And though she fought it with everything she had, a single truth refused to be buried. She wasn't afraid of the whispers. She wasn't afraid of the scandal. She was afraid she had lost Nathan forever. And if she had, she wasn't sure she knew how to survive the kind of silence that followed. The call came on a Thursday morning, just as Samantha was staring at a spreadsheet she had already redone 3 times. Her eyes were heavy from another sleepless night, her chest hollow from weeks of silence. When her phone buzzed with an unknown number, she almost didn't answer. But something in her gut told her to pick it up. "Good morning, Miss Miller," a woman's voice said, crisp and professional. "My name is Rachel Harmon. I'm calling from Harrison & Solutions. We recently received a strong internal referral for an open senior associate position, and your name was presented as a top candidate." Samantha blinked, her pen slipping from her fingers. Harrison & Solutions. The name carried weight, prestige, power, the kind of firm that didn't just hire, they handpicked. "I think you may have the wrong person," she said slowly. "I didn't apply." Rachel's tone didn't waver. It wasn't a mistake. The referral was marked confidential, but extremely strong. "We take those very seriously. Would you be available for a virtual interview this afternoon?" Her heart slammed against her ribs. Confidential referral. She knew deep down who had done this. Nathan. Even in silence. Even after everything. He had found a way to open a door for her when every other one had slammed shut. "Yes," she said quickly, too quickly. "Yes, absolutely." When the line clicked off, she sat frozen, the hum of the office fading around her. Her pulse drummed with suspicion and hope. Why now? Why her? But beneath the questions was something deeper, a flicker of gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. At 2 o'clock, she logged into the video call, nerves coiled tight in her stomach. Rachel appeared with 2 other panelists, their eyes sharp, their smiles polite. The questions came fast, but they weren't traps. They wanted to know how she led, how she adapted, how she recovered when everything broke. Samantha answered honestly, her voice steady, her words unpolished but true. She spoke of setbacks, of resilience, of listening when no one else would. For the first time in weeks, she felt alive again. When the call ended, Rachel's smile softened. "We'll be in touch very soon." That night, Samantha lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Nathan's voice the last time she heard it. She thought about the text he had sent. "I'm still here. Always." She thought about him sitting somewhere in his office, pulling strings silently for her, believing in her even when she had not believed in herself. 2 days later, the offer arrived. $18,000 a month, benefits, international exposure, the kind of role that could rewrite the rest of her life. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, hands pressed to her mouth, tears spilling silently. She signed without hesitation, but when she reached for her phone to tell him, her fingers hovered. What could she say? "Thank you. I know it was you. I don't deserve you." She typed the words again and again, deleting each draft. In the end, she sent only 3 simple words. "Thank you, Nathan." Minutes later, her phone buzzed with his reply. "You never had to ask." She clutched the phone to her chest, her tears falling freely now. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. A bridge across the silence, fragile but alive. And for the first time since everything had collapsed, Samantha let herself believe that maybe her story wasn't over. Not with Nathan. Not yet. 6 months had passed since the night Samantha lost everything and found something else in its place. The office of Harrison and Solutions gleamed with its glass walls and polished stone floors, and she carried herself through them with a steadiness that surprised even her. She was thriving, respected, promoted faster than she could have imagined. But even as her days filled with strategy sessions and client dinners, there was one silence she could not escape. Nathan had not answered her last message beyond the words you never had to ask. She had reread them 100 times, each one cutting in a different way. Gratitude was not love. Presence was not forgiveness. By the 9th month, her control cracked. On a Friday afternoon, she left early, claiming a personal emergency. She clutched a coffee from their old Spring Street cafe, the same order he had always remembered for her, and walked into the glass tower of Brooks Global without calling ahead. The receptionist blinked at her but smiled politely. "Mr. Brooks is in a meeting, but I'll let him know you're here. Please wait." The executive lounge was quiet, the art on the walls cold and abstract, the silence pressing against her lungs. She sat in one of the velvet chairs, coffee cooling in her grip, her heart pounding like it wanted to escape. After 10 minutes, the door opened. Nathan stepped inside. He looked different. Leaner, sharper, with dark shadows under his eyes that sleep could not erase. His tie was loosened, his suit slightly creased, and yet he still carried the kind of gravity that filled a room without trying. Samantha rose quickly, her throat tightening. "I didn't know you were coming," he said, voice low but edged with surprise. "I didn't either," she whispered. "I just needed to see you." For a long moment they stared at one another, the distance between them louder than any words. She clutched the coffee tighter, forcing the words out. "Thank you for what you did." His expression flickered, the faintest trace of softness crossing his tired eyes. "You earned that job. I just reminded them to look your way." She smiled, but it cracked almost instantly. "I've missed you." Nathan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. His eyes darted toward the glass wall of the lounge. Samantha followed his gaze and froze. A woman stood outside, elegant, blonde, dressed in a flawless, tailored suit, laughing with an assistant. She knew her face from articles and charity galas. "Lauren Mitchell." Her voice came out thin. "She works here now." Nathan's eyes darkened, but he didn't deny it. "She joined last month." "So you're together?" His silence was answer enough. At last he said carefully, "I'm trying. You pushed me away, Sam. I waited, longer than I should have, but people only wait so long before they have to move forward." The floor seemed to tilt under her. "I wasn't ready," she whispered. "I was ashamed. Not of you, of me, of what I thought it meant. And by the time I realized it, I thought you were gone." Nathan stepped closer then, his voice low and unsteady. "And what now?" Her chest ached. "I don't know, but I couldn't stay silent anymore." His face softened, then hardened, shifting between hope and defense. "I loved you, and maybe I still do. But love needs more than moments. It needs presence. And you were gone when I needed you most." Her eyes blurred with tears. "I know." She reached for his hand, desperate, trembling. But he didn't meet it. Not this time. His gaze dropped to the floor. Outside, Lauren's laugh rang faint and clear, sharp as glass. "I guess I should go," Samantha whispered. Nathan didn't stop her. She walked out with her head high, her chest breaking apart inside her, and the elevator doors closed with a final metallic sigh. But as the city lights spilled into view, one thought clawed at her chest. He hadn't said goodbye. Not really. And that silence, heavy and unfinished, carried the kind of promise that terrified her most. The story between them wasn't over. Not yet. The rain returned on a quiet Thursday morning, tapping against the glass walls of Samantha's corner office like a secret message. 6 months had passed since the day she had walked out of Brooks Global with her heart in pieces. 6 months since Nathan's silence had followed her down the elevator and into a life that looked successful but felt empty. She had built herself into someone unshakable at Harrison, a leader, a voice, a force. Yet the moment her assistant opened the door and said, "There's someone here to see you," her entire body stilled. He said his name is Nathan Brooks. Her breath caught. She whispered, "Send him in." The door opened and there he was, not in the immaculate suit of Brooks Global, not with the polished mask of control. He wore dark jeans, a slate gray t-shirt, and a rain-damp jacket. His face was leaner, his eyes ringed with exhaustion, but those hazel depths were the same, warm and searching. In his hand he carried a small folded piece of paper, crumpled from being held too long. "Hi," he said softly. Her voice trembled. "What are you doing here?" "I wasn't sure you'd see me," he admitted. "I almost didn't," she said truthfully. He nodded, glancing down at the paper before lifting his eyes back to her. "I ended things with Lauren." Her heart jolted. "What?" "3 months ago," he said quietly. "I let people think what they wanted. It was easier than explaining why I couldn't love someone the way I loved you." Her knees threatened to give way. "Nathan, I thought you moved on." "I tried," he said. "God, I tried. But every room I walked into felt empty without you. Every voice I heard wasn't yours. I saw you in every shadow, every silence, and I couldn't forget." Her hands trembled as he stepped closer. She whispered, "I wasn't ready. I was afraid. And by the time I understood what you were to me, I thought I had destroyed it all." He opened the folded paper and handed it to her. Inside was an old photo, faded from time. 2 teenagers on a rooftop, cheap sodas in their hands, the city glowing behind them. She had braces. He had ridiculous hair. They were laughing. "I kept that for 16 years, he said. "It was the night I realized I loved you. I never told you because I was afraid I'd ruin what we had. And in the end, I ruined it anyway." Her tears spilled, her vision blurring. "You didn't ruin it. I did. I pushed you away." "We both did," he said gently. "But I don't want the girl I loved back then. I want the woman standing in front of me now. Strong, flawed, real." She covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing softly, the weight of years and silence breaking apart inside her. "I don't know how to fix us," she confessed. "You don't have to," he whispered. "Just let me stay this time." He reached for her hand, and when his fingers closed around hers, the dam inside her broke completely. She leaned into him, tears wetting his shirt, and he held her with a steadiness that felt like home. He didn't try to wipe away her tears. He let her cry because love wasn't about pretending. It was about presence. When he finally pulled back, he knelt, not with the polished perfection of a grand gesture, but with the rawness of a man who had waited too long. From his pocket he pulled out a small box, not new, the paper worn, the ribbon frayed. Inside lay a delicate white gold band with an oval diamond, simple, almost modest. She gasped. "I know this ring. I bought it at a fair when I was 17, he said with a shaky smile. "I told myself I'd give it to someone if I was brave enough. And now I know. It was always you." Her tears blurred into laughter, the sound breaking through the storm. "Nathan Brooks, are you really asking me this now?" "I am," he whispered. "Because love isn't certainty, it's choice. And I'm choosing you every day, if you'll let me. Will you be my home?" She dropped to her knees in front of him, her tears falling against his hands as she whispered yes. "Of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, the metal cold, the history burning. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if the years of waiting, the months of silence, the weight of loss had all been leading here. The storm outside softened into a drizzle, the city lights glowing through the rain-streaked glass. Samantha pressed her forehead to his, their breaths mingling, their hearts steady for the first time in years. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fate. It was something harder, stronger. It was the courage to start again. And in that quiet office, with the world rushing outside unaware, their story began not as a desperate night or a shattered silence, but as a promise. To stay, to fight, to love in the imperfect present. It was the ending they thought they had lost, and the beginning they never stopped needing.